Hey, Shalom, Akim, Shalom, Shalom, all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash, double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aqua for me. Listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Requai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will as always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, it's just going to be a little bit of exhortation. Nothing too crazy, but pretty much the premise is don't allow emotions and feelings to overrun and compromise your etiquette. In the workplace, right? Yes, we have these emotions, right? We will feel emotions because the scriptures do talk about how we're in the house of mourning. We're in captivity and we're subject to payments. All these different this and that and the third. But the main point is to not allow those emotions to overrun you to the point where it starts to compromise and spill over into other facets of your life to the point where it puts a stain on it can put a stain on your reputation in the workplace, right? Yes, you're not going to be buddy buddy with everybody in the workplace, but the point is, it's very very important to have a good name, because a good name can get you very very far, right? And as a matter of fact, I guess I'll start off with that one here. So just bear with me as I make this lesson, because I'm just reflecting on some past experiences, and basically, in a nutshell, not to ramble on too much about myself, but just to give you an idea of what I'm speaking of, is the fact that I allowed emotions to overrun me to the point where it started to compromise my workplace etiquette. So I kind of had a sentiment of like, I just don't give a shit anymore, and I'm just gonna you know I'm just gonna forget about being punctual, right? And that's not a good look, right? Because a good name as a matter of fact, let me read it. Just bear with me on. This is Sirach chapter 41, verse 13. And it says, "A good life hath but a few days, but a good name endureth forever." Right? And when you think about, our people as a whole, when you think about the state of our people being under these bywords don't give us a very, very good name. These bywords essentially are words that dim our vibration, right? When people think about so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, when they think about you, there is a very bad reputation that comes with those names. There's a very stained reputation that comes with those names, because it's a reputation. What people think about thug life. They think about crime. They think about drugs. They think about unstable households, unstable, in terms of emotions, being compassed with, emotions and so on and so forth. They think about single mother homes. There's a bad reputation that comes with those bywords. You have a lot of children, and there's nothing wrong with having a lot of children anyway. It's just, they kind of make a mockery of it, right? Like especially tribes like Ephraim, that have a lot of children. But the point really is that with those bywords, it comes with a name, a reputation that is essentially not very positive. It's a very negative. When people think about our people, they think about the negative things, right? And then Esau, being the devil, also reinforces that in the media. So when you see our people on TV, they don't are more likely to be portrayed as whores, gangsters, adulterers, adulteresses, witches, um, never anything positive role models, right? Now, when you come under the understanding of knowing that you're an Israelite, there is also a sentiment, there's a conduct that accompanies that name. You know, there is a way, it's essentially there's a way to walk. And the scriptures say that a man shall be known by his walk, right? Should show you the kind of person that he is, right? So that's pretty much the importance of having a good name, because having that good reputation, can actually be very, very pleasing, especially in the midst of these heathens, right? And that's part of our, I think it was Moses that said it in Deuteronomy. He said, keep therefore and do them, because this is your wisdom and your sight of the other nations, because the nations are supposed to look at us as a trendsetter in righteousness, to be essentially like a beacon of light of how they're supposed to be, right? And just a quick testimony, I had a heathen, he was an Elamite, and he came up to me, he was asking me for advice, and I kind of gave him, just a little 2 cents on something he can do to him essentially improve his physical health. But this is not to boast in myself. This is just showing you, being under that name, that reputation, being under that vibration, being in tune with Yahweh Bashim Shai, it leads us to regain that light, that wisdom, right? And he said to me, I forgot exactly what he said, but he said something along the lines of, I wanted to come to you because you're very, very intelligent, right? And when you think about our people and the way that they behave, they're not seen in that way, right? They're not portrayed in that way either, because they're like, our people are very, very talented, but when it comes to etiquette, manners, and these sorts of things, emotional stability, emotional content, these sorts of things our people strongly lack in these areas, right? But anyways, beside the point, in regards to the emotions and heaviness, let me go to the book of, I'll stay in Sirach. This is Sirach chapter 30, verse 21, and it says, give not thy mind to heaviness, and afflict not thyself in thine own counsel. It says, verse 23, love thine own soul and comfort. Okay, I'll read verse 22, and it says, the gladness of the heart is the life of man, and joyfulness of a man prolongeth his days. Love thine own soul and comfort thine heart. Remove sorrow far from thee, for sorrow hath killed many, and there is no profit therein. Right? So these sorts of, like, we are in the house of mourning, right? But the point is to not let those emotions, or even it could have just been a trial, a situation that you probably were just going through, not to allow it to compromise your workplace etiquette, right? I made that unfortunate mistake in having a kind of like, I don't give two shits type of attitude, and it led to essentially, I had to work on my punctuality again. I couldn't just be sloppy like that anymore. I had to tighten up on those areas, right? But that's pretty much the point here, is not to allow these things, these emotions, these sentiments, these feelings, these different trials that we go through, to kind of basically overspill and essentially put a stain on that, that reputation. If you have a good reputation at work, that's a good thing, right? So, right, verse 24, and it says, envy and wrath shorten the life, and carefulness bringeth age before the time. A cheerful and a good heart will have a care over his meat and diet, right? And that's another thing also, because being in those kinds of situations also, it can even spill over into another facet, right? I'm just gonna eat flaming hot Cheetos all day. I'm just gonna eat ice cream all day, like, no, those are those are not good things to do, right? Just being mindful of those things to realize, okay, let me pull back, right? Let me confess my faults to a brother or something like that. What I'm saying? Like, those things. Let me pray, and you know let me work on developing proper conduct, strengthening my conduct, where that those areas that were lacking, so to speak, right? So um okay, let me just go here. Just bear with me on this. Just bear with me. Let me just look for this right here. See if I can get this in the NLT. Okay, so this is Daniel chapter 6, verse 1 in the NLT, and it says, Darius the Mede decided to divide the kingdom into 120 provinces, and he appointed a high officer to rule over each province. It says, the king also chose Daniel and two others as administrators, excuse me, to supervise the high officers and protect the king's interests. Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and high officers. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. It says, verse 4, then the other administrators began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs, but they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. He was faithful, responsible, and completely trustworthy, right? So the point here is that Daniel, in this, and even in the midst of captivity, he still maintained a certain level of etiquette. You know, when you go into KJV, the KJV said he had an excellent spirit on him. As a matter of fact, let me read that. Right, and 120, 100 and what? 20 provinces. That's a lot of provinces. That's a lot of responsibility, man. Um, as a matter of fact, let me just get this in the KJV real quick, because this is what the scriptures say about hold on, where is it? Okay, Daniel 6 and 3 in the KJV, and it says, then this Daniel was preferred above all the presidents and princes because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realms. Okay, so let me go to what excellent means in the etymology. Just bear with me, let me find this. So excellent. So excellent, it means distinguished for superior merit of any kind, of superior character or quality, uncommonly valuable for any reason, remarkably good. It says outstanding, towering, prominent, distinguished, superior, surpassing, right? And this is the ways of our forefathers, right? Like, our forefathers weren't just regular Pookies and Ray Rays. Excuse me, our forefathers actually had a vibration, a high vibration. They had high aura. This is an example of high aura. You know, the example of the kind of the way that they conducted themselves. It drew people to want to be around them. it drew people to want to try and know more about who they were, because Daniel was so in tune with Yahweh Bashem Shai, right? So what happens when you're so in tune with the Lord? It produces and continues to, it molds good conduct, right? So that's pretty much the oh, let me just read a little bit more here. It says surpass, superior, to rise, be eminent. It says lofty, great, and we're a great people. Scriptures say one shall be stronger than the other, right? Yes, we're built physically stronger than Esau and his descendants, the Edomites, right? But we're also of a moral, we're also of a higher stature, countenance. The way we carry ourselves is a lot better than these other nations, right? These other nations, like I said, they're supposed to look to us as the trendsetters in righteousness, right? So because when people see us, they don't see us as people who act with that moral excellence. They don't see us as people, as the way Daniel is conducting himself in the midst of captivity here, right? This is kind of way, this is the opposite of how our people are normally seen. This is Lamentations 4 verse 1, and it says, how is the gold become dim? How is the most fine gold changed? The stones of the sanctuary are poured out from every top of the street. The precious sons of Zion, comparable to fine gold, how are they esteemed as earthen pitchers, the work of the hands of a potter, right? So our people, this is the vibration of the majority of our people that conduct themselves, right? They don't conduct themselves as people, as princes, as people who come from a regal, royal bloodline. They conduct themselves as degenerates. The scriptures say that I have planted thee a noble vine and a holy and a right seed. How art then thou turned into a degenerate plant of a strange vine unto me? To roughly paraphrase, right? By following these other gods, this is the vibration our people, flock to, and these other gods require a certain, a different type of conduct. A conduct that causes you to transgress, that causes you to do sin. And sin is what? A transgression of the law, right? So, anyways, I guess I'll end off with this last one here, actually. Let me just get it real quick, because I quoted it. So that's Sirach 19, verse 29, and it says, a man may be known by his look, and one that hath understanding by his countenance when thou meetest him. A man's attire, excessive laughter, and gait, which is the way essentially somebody walks, show what he is, right? So just by the way you conduct yourself, right? So anyways, that's pretty much it. But I just wanted to do a short, quick exhortation. Don't allow those sentiments, those feelings to kind of overspill and compromise your workplace. Because if I'm speaking honest, also, just another short testimony, and hopefully this could be a faith booster, not to boast in myself. The fact that me changing and working on certain things, and even had managers ask me to essentially what's the word I'm looking for? They were happy to be a be like a reference, or to give me like a recommendation, so to speak, or sorry, they're offering to write me a recommendation. You know what I'm saying? Just by me conducting myself in a certain way. And again, this is not to toot my own horn. I'm just using this myself as an experience also, right? So anyways, I'll leave it there. But in Lord's will, as always, this was edifying. It's like give all praises, glory and honor to Yahweh Bashem Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.